I'm going to talk about the key challenges you face in the first mile of innovation. I will walk through the acronym DEFT, which is one of the ways you address these challenges: document, evaluate, focus, and test. I will introduce a second acronym, HOPE, and describe other best practices involved in testing and addressing key assumptions. So let me start by telling you a story. We're going to go back in time to the year 2009. Here I am in 2009. I am in Bangalore, a reasonably large city in India. A man is holding a blade right against my jugular vein. The man spoke no English, and I was loving it because I was living in the first mile of innovation. We had an idea. Insight has done lots of different things in our history. We are primarily today a consulting company. We are also a venture capital investor. At this period of time, we had an incubator where we created and launched new businesses. This is one of the businesses we incubated. Its name was Razor Rave. The idea here was, in India, in the men's grooming market, like many markets in India, there are extremes. If you're wealthy, you go and get great treatment, you get shaved, you get haircut, you get all sorts of things done to you, but it's expensive. If you're not wealthy, there are lots of barbers on the side of the road with equipment that might have been cleaned within the last year that can treat, but at very affordable rates, but with some quality problems. So we came up with an idea that was kind of in between those two. We would create these kiosks that were very small footprint, which meant that the overhead would be very low. We would bring in good service quality to make sure that we gave people a great experience, but charge them very low rates to get a haircut, a shave, etc. I was in the field, this is June of 2009, with the prototype kiosk experiencing Razor Rave. So why did I like this business? This is from an email that I sent my colleague in 2010. Here's at least one reason for it. There's a lot of hair in India. This is demonstrably true. I did offer a little bit more nuance to read than this. This was the argument behind it. There's a publicly traded company in the US that has $1 billion market capitalization playing in this space. Gillette, a big company in the US, part of Procter & Gamble, had recently purchased a services-based company. Gillette, in fact, had given us a little bit of capital to field test this idea of Razor Rave. So we see all these things and we say, we're on the cusp of creating this really great business. And we went out and we tested it in all sorts of different ways. We started with the truck test. One of the big questions that we had was, would this kiosk-based delivery model work? One of my colleagues, Vijay, took a few $100s and rented this truck for a couple weeks. Not only was this truck a rolling billboard for Razor Rave, the truck was hollowed out, so in the back was a stall and a barber. Our question was, would anyone in their right mind get in the back of a truck where a stranger with the blade awaited? And it turned out people would. They were interested in the concept. The first mile, that moment where you take an idea from paper and you translate it into reality. You're getting your first peso or rupee or dollar of revenue. You're getting your first real in-market learning. Is an exhilarating, is an exciting place. The first mile is also a very perilous place. I wrote that email to my colleague in January of 2010. By April of 2010, Razor Rave was dead. Why did that happen, and why is it so hard to go from great plans on paper to the reality of the marketplace? This is what the First Mile book focuses on, and this is what I'll talk about over the next period of time. I've been in this field, the field of innovation, as I mentioned this morning, for 16 years now. In that time, I have seen lots of ideas, hundreds, if not thousands. Some of them are from great big companies, some are from little companies, some are from startups, some are from my employees. Every one of them is the same, because every idea to do something different that creates value is partially right and partially wrong. This is the necessity of innovation. Because it hasn't quite been done before, there's always going to be assumptions and uncertainty behind it. The problem that you face at the first mile of innovation is you don't know which part is which. Now, we know the way we try to address this in large companies. We get to truth through analysis. We go and talk to experts. We run focus groups. We do market research. We come up with spreadsheets. We have elaborate alignment meetings. We have alignment meetings to prepare for the alignment meetings. We have alignment meetings to pick the food for the alignment meetings for the alignment meetings. We do all of this and emerge with what looks like a perfect plan. We then go forth and execute. There is no such thing as a perfect plan. If you follow this approach, you will learn a lesson taught by the great American philosopher, actor, and occasional boxer Mike Tyson, who once said everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. The punch you receive as an innovator is the plan that looked perfect on paper, ended up resting on shaky assumptions. Let me describe a couple punches that we took that resonated within the Razor Rave story as well. This hospital pictured here is a hospital that is near and dear to my heart. This is Gleneagles Hospital in Singapore. The hospital is about a mile away from where I live in Singapore, and in 2011, it's where my third child, Harry, was born. There he is with my wife, Joanne. And exactly 1 month ago today, this is where my fourth child, Teddy, was born. I now have shown you all 4 of my children, and it's not even 2 o'clock. That's a good job by me. I've run the test, by the way. Every presentation you give is a little experiment one way or another. I've run the test. If you show pictures of kids when you give presentations, statistically you get better feedback than if you don't. So at the end of the day, when you're giving feedback on the presenter, remember young Harry and young Teddy. Okay, so if you're someone like me that's living in a foreign country that's going through this life-changing event of having a child, the second you walk into a hospital in Singapore, your breath goes, you relax. Because of course, in Singapore, you've got world-class hospitals. You've got some of the best doctors in the world, modern medical instrumentation. Yet, Singapore does something that borders on a miracle. They spend less per capita than almost any country in the world on healthcare and get great outcomes. Where I'm from, the United States, sadly, is the inverse of this. We spend 1 of every $5 of GDP on healthcare, but we don't get particularly good outcomes. So about 11 years ago now, an idea begins to form. Medical tourism between the U.S. and Singapore. We'll go and find people who are undergoing elective procedures. We'll fly them out to Singapore, have the procedure done at a place like Gleneagles, put them up at the Raffles Hotel to recuperate, or Fairmont Hotel would be even better, to recuperate, all the while saving thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars. We spoke to a lot of customers about this. Universally, they told us they loved the idea, and of course, they would sign up for it. So confident in what we heard from customers, we invested a couple $100,000, raised some external capital, hired a CEO, and launched the business under the name ChoiceMed. This is the punch we received and the lesson you often learn in the first mile of innovation. People lie. They lie all the time, not because they're trying to mislead you, but because we don't really know what we're going to do in the face of uncertainty about the future. The lie that customers told us was that they would sign up for the service. We heard that. We began trying to find our first honest-to-goodness paying customers. We went to where we knew they were, retirement communities in the state of Florida. We ran seminars to educate people about the service. Nobody showed up. Once they were faced with the real possibility of getting on a thin metal tube and flying 8,000 miles to a place that honestly few had heard of and none could identify on a map, the stated interest dissipated. Good innovators listen, of course, but more critically, as quickly as possible, they try to get customers to demonstrate what matters to them with their actions rather than their words. Here's another challenge. As we were launching the Razor Rave business, concurrent to that, we had an idea to do essentially the same thing in the laundry business. Again, India, you've got extremes. Wealthy people have great things in their home. They've got tons of household help. Laundry is a problem solved for them. The rest of India relies on the village dhobi, who picks up their clothes, brings them to a communal pool, uses harsh chemicals, beats them against rocks, and brings them back 7, 8, 9 days later. It's very affordable, about 20 rupees per kilogram of clothing, but the quality is really low. So here we were with this idea here right in the middle, a small format kiosk. We would charge a little bit more than the Adobe, and we pushed that price up from 30 rupees per kilogram all the way up to 90. No one stopped coming to the kiosk. We would offer better service, 24-hour turnaround, modern equipment, modern detergents. Everybody, again, loved this one. We built a really good, really detailed spreadsheet model showing how beautiful this business was going to be. The small format kiosk made each kiosk in our spreadsheet really economically powerful. And then when you spread it to thousands across India and to other similar emerging markets, boy, the numbers sure look great. Based on those spreadsheets, we invested a few $100,000 of our own dollars and raised about $2.5 million of external capital, and the race was on. We expanded to about 30 of these kiosks at peak. They were in Bangalore, Mysore, Mumbai. We were named one of India's hottest startups. People lie and spreadsheets deceive. The deception in our spreadsheets is the beautiful business that we thought we saw in electronic format actually was a brutally ugly business. We could never figure out how to charge enough money for a single transaction to cover the cost of delivering that transaction. Therefore, we could never make a single unit profitable. Therefore, we could never make a system profitable. If I could wind back the clock, the one thing I would have done differently was not take $2.5 million. With all that funding, we had big pressure to expand quickly. We were then so busy fighting fires, literally, one of these kiosks caught on fire, that we could never figure out that the core business model wasn't working. Scott Cook is the founder and chairman of a company called Intuit, a US software company, very innovative guy. He's got one of the best lines you will ever see about innovation. For every one of our failures, Cook says, we had spreadsheets that looked awesome. The spreadsheets always look awesome. You don't see something if you're a top leader other than awesome spreadsheets. I know how goal-seek works. I know how what-if statements work. An awesome spreadsheet and an awesome business are two fundamentally different things. So here's the challenge. Every idea is partially right and partially wrong. Spreadsheets lie and customers lie and spreadsheets deceive, which means sometimes when you see a white space, a blue ocean, a green field, whatever, there are perfectly good reasons why it exists. And even if you succeed, it will always take you longer than you think, and it will always cost more than you expect. So what do you do in the face of this? Remember these two acronyms, DEFT and HOPE. Let me walk through the first one, DEFT. The D stands for document. The idea here is that you spell out what you're planning to do with a good degree of specificity. This does not mean writing a PhD level thesis. Nobody cares that much about it. But it does mean trying to spell out all the things that are required for you to succeed. The E stands for evaluate. Here you're picking your idea up and looking at it from as many angles as you can. You do want to look at the numbers. You want to look at how it fits qualitative patterns. You want to run thought experiments about what might happen if you do this, will a competitor respond, etc. The point here is not to figure out if it's a good or bad idea. You can't know that yet. The point is to begin to separate out what are the facts that are true certainties from the assumptions, from the unknowns and the risks. And if you are humble about it, as we talked about before, there'll be a lot more that you don't know than you know. That feeds into the third part of the process, where you focus on the areas of biggest uncertainty. We have a little simple table that we use to do this to inform what you do when you go and test, the last letter in the acronym, called the first mile certainty table. I told you every idea is the same, partially right and partially wrong. Every successful idea is also the same because it passes 3 tests. It targets a real market need, it delivers against that need, and the numbers work. This is a very simple way for you to figure out how confident you should be about each of these areas. Is there a need? A customer says there's a need means nothing. Customers lie all the time. They show you with current behavior that you're targeting a good problem. That helps. They use your idea, you're getting closer. They pay money for it more than once and start telling other people about it. That's when you can be really clear it's a real need. Can you deliver? Dreams are great. It's a good starting point for innovation, but you don't invest billions of pesos behind a dream. You find ways to make your idea progressively more tangible to figure out if you can really do it at scale. Do the numbers work? We spend a lot of time on spreadsheets, and that can teach us something. But until you've actually earned money and therefore validated your unit economics, until you know how you're going to make profits and cover your costs, until you've actually done it, you really can't know for sure. This table is a very quick way for you to figure out where do you know the least, and therefore where do you need to test the most. There are lots of different experiments you could run. This is a sample of some of the things that are in the first mile. I won't go through all of these, but I will pick a few just to illustrate how many different ways there are to learn about uncertainty in the early stages of innovation. One of the simplest things to do is to connect basic desk research. There are many plans that I see from entrepreneurs pitching for funding or people inside companies that haven't done the very basic things that you can do with Google. Some of this can be more advanced. The little picture here is a patent that Apple filed in 2004 for essentially a touchscreen to be used on a mobile device. It should not have surprised anybody that Apple was moving into the mobile phone space. Their patents were there waiting to be discovered. So go and do desk research. Run a thought experiment. This is one of the best ways to test in your own head. There's an example in the first mile, one of my favorite stories from McDonald's, the fast food company. They were thinking about introducing a salad that had a certain number of shrimp in it. Everything looked good. The customers loved the way it tasted. It fit their supply chain. It fit health trends, etc. Someone on the team then said, if we're successful, what does this business look like? How many shrimp would we need? It turned out that at McDonald's scale, with the way they designed the salad, they would have cornered the world market on shrimp, making the price higher, rendering the salad unprofitable. No one had to do any work to do this. You can do something like this by role playing. Imagine yourself at a competitor's office. What will they do when you launch this? Imagine yourself as a customer. How will they react to it? These kinds of thought experiments can teach you a ton. Complete a transaction. This is a good one. So when we were playing around with the Village Laundry Service, later named Chamak, the laundry business, what you see here is the first rupee of revenue that we earned. And that was within 3 weeks of coming up with the idea for the offering. Now, ultimately, this idea didn't end up working in its original instantiation, but we learned a ton by actually going through the process of finding a customer, of getting her to come to the stall, of getting rupees from her, of delivering the service. As you walk through all the different elements of what it takes to actually do those things, it teaches you a ton about your business. And then I think the last one I'll comment on, I'll come back to this word here in just a minute. Last one I'll comment on are some of the things here. So we are a believer in the value of doing your numbers, trying to figure out if things will work. But our general belief is, because you know that every spreadsheet tells a lie, you want to reverse the way you think about financial forecasts. Rather than building from the bottom up to get to an answer, you start by asserting what your answer needs to be. How many rupees do you need to, how many pesos do you need to, how many whatevers do you need to earn in year 5? Then you work backwards to identify the assumptions that would need to be true in order for that answer to have any hope of coming true. The general idea in all of these things is you recognize that answers will be flawed, so assumptions are where you need to focus. So then the last part of this is figuring out how you smartly experiment. So the words here are words that were written by Steve Blank. Steve Blank is one of the smartest people out there on this topic. He's a professor at the University of California, Berkeley, and at Stanford, but he's nobody's academic. In his career, he's participated in dozens of startups. If you've heard of the lean startup, Eric Ries is one of his proteges. You see what he said here. We know the traditional MBA curriculum for large companies doesn't work in a startup. It is toxic. You need different rules, roadmaps, skill sets, and tools in order to do it. What are the key tools that you need to do to smartly manage experiments? We'll start with this one here. This is something that Jeff Bezos insists on in Amazon.com, the 2-pizza rule. If Amazon is working on something really big, like the origins of Amazon Web Services or the first Kindle or whatever, Bezos says the team has to be small enough that no more than 2 pizzas can adequately feed it. The reason why this is important is small teams go so much faster than big teams. A mistake we make in large companies is we replicate the company inside our innovation team. We've got a legal rep and a QA rep and a marketing rep, and we know what happens. At the meeting, the legal rep says, I've got a legal update. Here's all the things the QA rep does the, oh, meeting's over, we got to get back together next week. And no progress is ever made. Most startups start with 2 people, someone to make something, someone to sell something. Keep the team lean and mean. Remember, your first idea is going to be wrong, so embrace your inner MacGyver. You know MacGyver, I know it's a well-known cultural touchstone within the Philippines. The show on from 1985 to 1992, now rebooted, very exciting times. The idea is MacGyver can get out of any situation using everyday materials, duct tape and pretty much no more. You want to figure out how you do the same thing because you know you'll be wrong. So you want to be as flexible as you possibly can so that when your kite crashes, when your idea doesn't work, it's really easy to go and try again. Let me then expand out to explain the last 2 pictures here. Does anyone know what this is a picture of? Submarine. Can anyone be more specific? What type of submarine is it? Nuclear. Very good. This is the USS Nautilus, the world's first nuclear-powered submarine. An amazing feat. It's commissioned in 1954. The idea of nuclear propulsion is only 5 years old. 60 years now this program has been in existence, and the U.S. has not had a major technological incident. Why is that? Steve Spear, in the very good book, The High Velocity Edge, argued it was all about the discipline that Admiral Rickover brought to the scientific uncertainty in the program. By analogy, I think you can bring the same discipline to the strategic uncertainty behind innovative ideas you might work on. You never know for sure in the first mile, so be a scientist. Start with a hypothesis, what you expect will happen. Design an experiment that's got clear objectives, what you're hoping to learn, etc. Make a prediction, even if you have no idea what the answer will be. In the case of the nuclear sub-program, the scientists were designing the shielding going around the radioactive core. Rickover said, tell me, where will that metal fatigue the most? No one had a clue. Science was too new to understand it, but by making a prediction and then executing in a way in which you can test and measure that prediction, in this case, putting sensors in the metal, even when you're wrong, you have created an opportunity to learn. You never know for sure at the first mile of innovation, but you sure can have hope. Hypothesis, objective, prediction, and execution plan. I'm going to explain that last picture after I give you a chance to practice with this for just a minute. What I'd like you to do over the course of the next 10 minutes or so is go back to the idea you were talking about before. If you weren't talking about an idea before, make up an idea or take some new thing that you're working on inside your company. Try to think of a couple assumptions that are behind the idea. What would need to be true in order for your idea to be viable? Think about how you might use one of the things that I flashed up here to learn more about it in the next 90 days. And if you've got time, think about a specific experiment you could do that follows the discipline of hope that I talked about. You've got a simple template to do all of this in the material that you were given. And again, we don't expect you're actually going to be able to do all these things now, just a chance to practice a little bit and give you some tools that you can bring back to your company after today.